Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Courtside with Beilinson Tennis, part of the Tennis Channel Podcast Network. Today is discussion time. Recently, Steve and I have had some outstanding guests. We hope you've enjoyed listening to all those conversations. We're having a blast, not only Steve and myself, but we're having a blast with the guests as well. We're going to do something different. It's a topic that I've talked about for years. I definitely have my thoughts on it. Steve knows my thoughts. I've shared some of my thoughts with Steve. What's different in this one is I don't know Steve's thoughts on this, and we did this on purpose. Generally, when Steve and I have a discussion between ourselves or with a guest, we have a general construct of where the discussion is leading. This discussion among Steve and I will be a little bit more free flowing. So we'll see where it goes. And the main topic today is the fall season, and specifically the tournaments after the final slam of the year. We'll take it from more of a broad construct, and then we'll narrow it down specifically into whether or not these Masters 1000s are really the right place in the ATP Tour calendar schedule. So with that, Steve, good morning, welcome, and I'm looking forward to talking about this with you.
The same here, David. This should be a compelling topic. I'm looking forward to it as well.
So let's get started. A few years ago, I was of the thought of, let's shut it down after the US Open. Let's just shut it down. You still have the year end. We'll still do that, but we really don't have a pretty good off season. We have a very, very short off season. A lot of other sports have a lengthy off season. I thought it would be good just to kind of shut it down, give everyone time to take a deep breath. I've changed my thoughts on that because I think the tour could package itself a little bit better. So I'm not as extreme of let's just shut it down at the end of the US Open. I do feel there's a place for tournaments. Before we hit Masters 1000, what's your general view on the tournaments after the final slam of the year?
Well, I know, David, I have friends who are writers, some players, just fans, all types of tennis people that have felt somewhat like you may be used to, in the sense of when the Open ends, that's pretty much not only the end of the Grand Slam tournament season, but it's the end of the season. But I don't feel that way, because having experienced so many great autumns in my life, I think I like that stretch from post-Open into November, where we then get the year-end championships and finally the Davis Cup finals. Sometimes they used to carry into December. I feel that we do need a longer off season. Yes, the women have done a better job with that than the men, but I think we do need those 1000s spread out, and I think we need that. I think the players chasing points, David, is a great thing. As we talk, we're watching it right now because we're doing this. We're talking right now just before the start of the Paris Masters 1000, which gets back to your central point. And I think that it's great that the players still have so much incentive to qualify for the year-end tournament, which will be in Italy this year rather than London, and have that. It keeps them going. It keeps them powered. It keeps them incentivized. So I do like it, and I feel like you kind of need that one big Masters 1000, which is coming up in Paris, and we've had two before, but the Shanghai has been canceled, and this calendar is slightly different right now. But I feel like you've got to have one or two post-Open leading up to the year end. Tell me your qualms about the 1000. I'm interested to hear your case.
Okay, a couple of things. I guess we'll hammer in the Masters 1000 because you and I are kind of in agreement that we still need other tournaments. I'm good with that. I think the qualms of the Masters 1000s after the last slam, there's a couple things. I think the field in the fall is often depleted. It's not a Masters 1000 typical field. That's one. Two, as far as the chasing points with you, I agree with you if there's a guy at 10 or 11 who's really trying to get to that year-end finals. I like that. But because these fields can be depleted, you can get some crazy results, and you see it every fall. And I'll give you a drastic one, and you know this, but in 2017, Jack Sock was like 25 going into Paris. He won that field beating nobody. When I say nobody, I mean no one within the top 10 or 15. I think Lucas Pouille was like 17 or something. That was the highest guy he faced. And he went from like 25 to 9, and he got in because I think there was an injury. The next year, Kachanov won Paris. I think.
Yeah, he beat Djokovic. Of course, that was Djokovic coming off a long match with Federer in the semifinals that year, and then I don't think he would have lost to Kachanov in that final. I see it's a good point you're making. I don't like to see a Jack Sock situation like that where you don't really go through the best. I feel that happens kind of infrequently, though. And let's take what's going on right now. All the top guys are going to be in Paris, preparing for London. Djokovic making his first appearance since the U.S. Open, and Medvedev coming back, and Medvedev still with a chance. Doesn't look like a great chance, but 1,900 points behind Djokovic as we talk, to try to overtake him for the year-end number one. So I feel like what you're saying is very legitimate, but that it's infrequent.
Do you think if Djokovic or Medvedev lose in the quarterfinals or even in the round of 16, they care?
Well, yes, I do. Actually, I do, because especially now, I mean, Djokovic wants to set that record, David, is 7 years at number one. He can't break Pete Sampras's 6 years in a row, but he can get the most total years, which is a big achievement. To me, it's a bigger achievement than the number of weeks at number one, whether he ends up with 360 weeks or 370 or whatever his total ends up being at the end of his career. I believe the year ends are what really matter. You were the best player for that entire year, that whole campaign. So yes, actually I do, because I think, yes, they know they'll have another chance in Italy at the year end for sure. But I think they want to, in Djokovic's case, I think he'd like to maybe try to wrap up number one in Paris and take pressure off the year-end championships. And in Medvedev's case, he's trying to defend the title. So I do believe that. But you don't seem to agree.
I think those guys would care a lot more about the results. And we're not talking Indian Wells this year, because Indian Wells is usually in the spring, and that was a fantastic tournament. But
Sure.
Again, on the men's side, you get crazy results again. But we're not going to talk about that because that was just a one-off. But I think those top guys, I think they could be so depleted by the end of the year. And I'm talking general. I'm not talking specifically this year, but these top guys have played so much tennis. They can be so depleted, and it's almost to me like just kind of going through the motions. There are requirements to play these Masters. Now, again, if you're Djokovic, I think there's a certain age requirement, number of years you've played them. There is a carve out, a very minor carve out, but for the most part, you're required to play them. I don't think they have the same want to at this point of the year for a Masters 1000 after the final slam as they would a Miami or an Indian Wells or, Rome.
Well, I see what you're saying. Although it's funny. I mean, look at Djokovic. Take Djokovic as an example. He came back after winning the Australian, took a long break, and who did he lose to on the clay in his first Masters 1000 of the season? Dan Evans. Now, I don't think he did care that there, because in other words, it's timing. So in that case, did it destroy Novak's morale? No, because he's thinking, I'll get better. I'm going to play as much as I need to before Paris, and I'm going to win the French.
Yes.
That's my goal. So in that case, I'm not sure that one. And that was the first Masters 1000 of the year. So I think it's somewhat timing. I think there's always the danger that they could at any point in the year feel in any given 1000 that they can forgive themselves a loss. But they also are top of the line professionals, David. And I think for the most part, they fight hard for every tournament they play, particularly the Grand Slams events, obviously at first and foremost. And then the 1000s come next. So many points available.
So to your point, everyone's focused on the Grand Slams. Those Masters 1000s, the 8 Masters 1000s before, they're all basically in preparation to peak for the next slam, right? You have these two, and what are you peaking for? I mean, the season's basically over. You have the year end. There is the race of the 9th or 10th, 11th guy, but I just don't feel it's the same meaning as the previous 8 do.
I think it will, because this number one ranking is up for it depends. I mean, a lot of years, especially. I mean, yeah, I think of some great years in the 90s and Pete Sampras closing out seasons and needing the year end to make sure he was number one, and Djokovic and Murray playing in London in the last match of the year in the year end
The
championship.
year end, I'm good. I'm good with the year end. It's the Masters 1000.
No, okay, I get you. But I believe that those Masters 1000s, that they have the meaning because of what they're leading toward. And in this case, it's leading toward that year end. No, the year end, it's true that the year end is not the US Open or any of the slams. Absolutely right. But it still has a real pertinence. So,
and I want that tournament. I like that tournament. I want that in.
Listen, I stand by my case. However, I think you're making a very good case on your side. These are all valid points you're making, but I believe it depends on the player and his situation at the time. Djokovic, for instance, right now, I think he really wants to finish the year strong. It was a big emotional letdown to lose in the US Open final, but now he's taken his good long break and he's back and he wants to prove that he deserves that year-end number one. And Medvedev's case, defending that it's not easy to defend a Masters 1000. I think he wants to prove he can do that. And then they both want to go to the year end and peak even more there. But I think we're going to see some pretty good tennis in Paris this time around. I think we're going to see certainly those two eager. And then you somebody like Tsitsipas, David. Oddly enough, when he got to number 3, he had his photo taken. It was a big deal to him earlier in the year when he reached number 3. And then he's spoken since about how he really wants to end the year number 3. Well, that's in danger now. Zverev is right on his heels. So he will be really up for it to try to end his recent slump. So I think there are a lot of guys with something to prove this time. And that was not the case 4 years ago when you mentioned the Jack Sock case. So there are certain times and certain years where guys might come there and feel that a win is a bonus, but a loss is excusable.
I have 2 other ideas. I think the fall season could be a wonderful opportunity to package the sport and provide more prize money and rankings for some lower ranked guys. And this is a utopia idea. People way smarter than me haven't figured it out yet because we have so many different entities in the tennis world. But I think this could be something where after the US Open, you can freeze the rankings and pick your number. The number could be arbitrary, whether it's 15 or 20 or 30. And maybe you freeze that and let the guys outside of the top 20 or 30, whatever, compete for these events, and you have prize money. And again, whether it is still classified as a Masters 1000 or you just make them 500s, but you have prize money now that can get distributed to some lower ranked guys that maybe not has been able to be passed down through the course of the year. I think it's an amazing opportunity to do that.
Yeah, it certainly would be an opportunity. I think it would be complicated to try to figure out how you're going to freeze the rankings of the top guys. So it would take a lot of careful thought. And I don't think you would put them as style. You say maybe 500s. I think more likely that's probably a fairer way to distribute points if you're going to pursue the scenario you're describing. But it would be interesting. I still wish, David, and I think you'll probably agree. I still wish we could have some more combined events toward the end of the year. I think we combine 1000s, and certainly I think they would be great to have year-end championships together.
You've said that before. I agree with you. And we saw Indian Wells as a one-off, but I mean, that was amazing. It was just performed about a month ago. The other thing is, I think maybe burnout, and whether it's from the fans, whether it's from the people who work the sport, whether it's from the players, I think you could, after the US Open, you could do some fun events like the Laver Cup. Maybe you have the women added to the Laver Cup, like we've said. Because that, I think, is a fresh perspective. It's not the usual grind. It's not the usual, it's just me. I got to compete, every single day against the best players in the world. Like, have something that energizes the players. And you see that Laver Cup is shortly after the last slam. And you don't really feel fatigue from any of those players playing it. They're all fired up to go.
But Laver Cup is a great showcase because it allows them to play shorter matches and the super tie break to decide the third set. And it's ideal for them because they they fight hard. They feel the responsibility of not letting their teammates down, but they really have nothing to lose. It's ideal, and yet they do feel the tension. You can sense that responsibility definitely kicks in. You're right. I mean, the more of that type of flavor we can get in the sport, the better.
Yeah, I mean, I did a Twitter poll. I've done this a couple of times. I've done a Twitter poll because I'm trying to see where other people have fall with this topic, and you and I, this is the first time you and I have really gone into it, and it's close. The Twitter poll I did was really, really close. I think it was like one or two extra votes that said we should not have Masters 1000 events. But there's no landslide vote. I mean, it's interesting. Again, this is not coming from a tournament director's perspective. I'm just obviously if I'm a tournament director and I have a Masters 1000, I'm going to want it no matter where it is in the calendar. It's more just from a fan, more just from a person, looking at the sport as a whole and seeing what we can do better. I think
Yeah, Dave,
ideally,
a quick point for you. I think you're taking a very thoughtful approach. My other concern about it is I don't want to see them bunched too close together. You can't play those Masters 1000s too early in the year because of where the Australian Open is positioned. So then
right.
we wait Monte Carlo and Madrid and Rome, and you get a bunch on the clay there, and then we have some in the summer, and that's why I think they want some in the fall. I wouldn't want to see them all packed into spring and summer.
I'm good with 8. I mean, again, the tournament directors in the fall are going to hate my thought, but
oh, sorry. So you're saying just cut down and make maybe 7 or 8 instead of 9.
I'm great with the schedule until after the U.S. Open. I just don't. Yeah. I think it's just a very long season, especially for the top guys. They put so much into those Masters 1000 and Grand Slams leading up to the U.S. Open. I don't think I would get an argument from any of the top guys to say, let's shut it down. Maybe let's just do Laver Cup. Let's have some fun, different types of events to keep it fresh. And again, I think it's a wonderful opportunity for the sport as a whole to package this to give guys a little bit lower ranked an opportunity to do well in some tournaments after the last slam of the year.
Yeah, it's an interesting case. And the guy that I think would probably be with you 121% is Nadal. Think of the number of times Rafa exhausted in the fall, and he doesn't like the indoor tournaments as much. He's never been as happy indoors, and we've seldom seen the best of Nadal post U.S. Open. So there's no doubt many players would agree. On the other hand, then you have the Federers and Djokovic's who have traditionally enjoyed that part of the year and played some of their best tennis indoors and including at the Masters 1000. So I'm not at all surprised by the results of your poll because it's a complicated discussion. There's a good case to be made either way. I still want to see it. I still want to see it as it is, but I fully understand your point of view.
Let me ask you this question, Steve. Would you, or put your mind in one of the players, would you rather win one of the 2 fall Masters 1000s and not win a slam, or win 1 slam and lose in the 3rd round of both of those fall Masters?
Listen, the slams are so important. I would never, I would hate to be faced with that. It's a dilemma. It's a tough choice to have to make. You're never going to want to give up a Grand Slam tournament.
Never. I would take a slam a million times and twice on Sunday.
But also we're talking, that's a different argument. We're talking more, I guess, about the distribution, the placement of these tournaments, when they should be held. And your central point, of course, is that players by the end of the Open, everybody's pretty exhausted. True. But I still like that home stretch. I still like the fact that the guys that still have the incentive, and to see how is Djokovic going to perform after this long a time off and first tournament since the loss at the U.S. Open to Medvedev in the finals. Medvedev, disappointing form and apparently some niggling injuries when he played in Indian Wells. He's been a little bit deliberately vague about that, which I think is the right thing for him to do. How does he respond to coming back to winning those 2 big prizes he got at the end of the last year with the Paris Masters 1000, followed by winning the year-end championship. So I still believe, and again, the players I mentioned, Tsitsipas absolutely determined to break out of his slump, and Zverev trying to keep going, and he's so hot right now and eager. So I think we'll have to see it'd be interesting to see how Paris plays out. as we speak, to see how all the leading players look and how eager they are to win that prize.
Yeah, I want to make something clear, and you hit on it. I have nothing against the Paris Masters or the Shanghai Masters. This is all about timing. If Paris and
Yeah.
Shanghai were in the spring, and the two in the spring were in the fall,
Yeah.
I'd be saying the same thing. I'd take the same position. It's all just about timing. It's not about the tournaments. It's not about the
Oh,
specific
that's
tournaments at all.
Oh, no, that's totally clear. Now, but of course, the problem with Paris, David, is that it can't be too close to the French Open. That in a big city like Paris.
No, I think 10 may be too much. I think maybe we keep it
Yeah.
at 8. I don't know, but it's an interesting discussion. I don't think anything's gonna change. You just see wacky results in the fall pretty consistently. And I think you're going to continue to see wacky results because I think some of these guys are just tapped out. But we'll see. I don't know. I'll leave it to you to add. It's really all I got on it. I wanted to hear your take on it because you and I surprisingly had never really gone deep into this discussion. And it was interesting for me to hear your perspective.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting time of the year. And again, I think for some players that there is a certain complacency and a sense to want to kick back. And for others, there's a much higher drive as we get to the end. And therefore, for them, the chance to fare well at a Masters 1000 in Paris this year and then follow up in the year-end championships is very important to them, and they'll prove it. For others, maybe not so much so. But I do believe, looking at the real upper crust right now, I see them all very enthused about playing that last Masters 1000 of the season leading up to the year end. For different reasons, I think they're all highly motivated.
And we don't have Roger, Rafa, and Dominic Thiem because of injuries right now, and those three would obviously be right up in the mix.
So in Rafa's case, I think he's kind of. I think he's not remorseful about missing this part of the year. It's never been his favorite part of the year. And sometimes, being the great professional he is, he's played on despite not necessarily being entirely happy. And he would have almost rather shut down his season in some cases after the Open. But he's so professional that he's played on despite everything. And I think the fact that part of his time off includes this stretch of the year is just fine with him, because he wants to come back strong and be fresh for that first half to 2/3 of 2022.
I would love to take a poll, and it could be anonymous, but it could be grouped by rankings, and you see where they stand. You know, guys ranked 1 through 20, and then guys ranked 21 through 100 to see how they feel about the fall season. Because I think the guys 1 through 20 would vote differently than the guys 21 through 100. But I don't know if we'll ever get to that. But
it would be similar to your poll that you just did on Twitter. I think the top 20 would be fairly evenly divided on it. That's what makes this such an interesting discussion. I could see that one coming out 10-10.
No. Oh no. Well, this was great. Like I said, I don't think this is going to be changed anytime soon, the schedule. Do you?
No, I don't. I think it's too complicated. The only thing that changes the schedule, obviously, as we've seen with Shanghai cancel, is COVID and the tour having to react to the circumstances as they have for these last couple of seasons. But no, I think otherwise the structure is going to stay in place. And because there's not an overwhelming, if there was a crusade for this, if there were if it was overwhelming sentiment toward what you're saying, and there is definitely some, then I think they might have been pushing the tour to do something about it. But that hasn't happened, at least not yet.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm surprised that it hasn't. And I mean, if you're going years ranked number 1, so Novak's all fired up. But like, I'm telling you, I honestly, Novak, Roger, and Rafa, if they said the season's over after the U.S. Open, I think they're good. But
yeah, good. Fair enough.
We shall see. Well, this was a good topic. It's on the shorter side of our discussion, but I wanted to hear your perspective. So thanks, Steve, and we'll see how this plays out. It should be fun last couple months of the year.
Yeah, thank you, David. I enjoyed hearing your I enjoyed hearing your case, and I think listeners will as well. And it'd be interesting to see what kind of response we get to our opinions on this topic.
Yes, I agree. We're looking forward to hearing that. So thanks again, Steve, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, David.